Suspect arrested by police in Barcelona car ramming attack case has claimed that his identity was stolen to rent the car. Police has earlier arrested 28-year-old Driss Oukabir in connection with the attack. Now, Driss is supposed to be of Moroccan origin. Earlier, authorities in Catalonia confirmed that the people from 24 nations are affected in the car ramming attack in Barcelona's Las Ramblas. According to media reports, the injured in the Las Ramblas attack include 3 Australians, 3 Dutch and 3 Greek, including a woman, 2 children and 13 people were killed in massive car ramming. The Spanish police has launched a massive terror crackdown across the country hours after attacking Las Ramblas. Police began anti-terror crackdown in Cambrils and foiled a second terror attack, killing 5 terror suspects. According to reports, the 5th suspect who was injured and arrested has now died. Reports suggest that the terror suspects were carrying suicide vests. However, police have said 1 police officer was also injured in the shootout. According to reports, a number of police officers were also injured during the operation. Meanwhile, the Islamic State has claimed that the responsibility for the attack. Barcelona officials have ordered all public events to be cancelled while metro and the train stations in the area were closed. Police has also set up checkpoints on the highways around Barcelona. Let's listen in to some of the eyewitnesses' ordeal.
Voy por la calle atrás de la Rambla a las 5:05 de la tarde. Hoy he escuchado un rumore mucho fuerte. Era la furgoneta que se ha schiantato sulle edicole. Después me voy por esta calle, ninguno sabía nada porque también la policía sabía que ha hecho el atentado. Y después voy otra vez y todo cerrado, toda la gente que escapaba por ahí.
Gente gritando, toda asustada, se metía por todos lados, toda la gente por allí con la cara toda sangrando y todo. Terrible.
En plena esquina del Metro Liceu, escuché un sonido de una furgoneta que mucha gente se caía al suelo. Y yo digo, ¿qué pasa? Y yo estuve con el refresco y de los nervios se me cayó todo y me ensucié. Y la gente se caía al suelo con todas las ramblas, con todas las mesas, las copas, los platos, todo. Y yo quería pasar al frente, pero no podía pasar.
No sé cómo una persona es capaz de hacer un acto de tal manera, ¿me entiendes? Cuando la gente lo que viene aquí, la gente lo que viene a disfrutar, a pasear, muchos turistas, ¿entiendes? Entonces, ¿qué corazón puede tener una clase de personas así?
Ha habido confusión absoluta, la policía nos ha dado orden de cerrar los restaurantes, todas nuestras terrazas han sido evacuadas por el pánico de la gente, el pánico, pues ha venido en este momento, no se puede reaccionar, no se sabe cómo reaccionar, la gente muy asustada, está dentro de los locales, tenemos los locales cerrados a cal y canto, nadie puede salir, es el pánico absoluto, ahora mismo no sabemos nada, no sabemos qué ha pasado, por la televisión hemos visto que ha habido un atropello, pero no sabemos nada más, solo orden de no salir de los locales.
Catalan police has said that the attacks in Las Ramblas, thwarted attack in Cambrils and the earlier house explosion in Alcanar are all connected. World leaders have also reacted to the gruesome terror incident. US President Donald Trump condemned the attack and urged the people of Barcelona to remain strong and tough. French President Emmanuel Macron expressed solidarity with the victim. London Mayor Sadiq Khan too expressed his anger. He also extended his condolences to the families of the victim. British Prime Minister in a statement expressed full support to the people of Barcelona. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau too expressed his sadness over the incident.
Before I begin, I'd like to address the horrific terror attack that occurred just a few hours ago in Barcelona, Spain. The latest scenes of carnage and mayhem sicken us all. And as the President said earlier today, the United States condemns this terror attack and we will do whatever is necessary to help.
Parlant d'un acte de dimensions molt greus i que volem condemnar enèrgicament. La democràcia i els valors intrínsecs que en són, de la llibertat i la igualtat, estan sempre per damunt de la violència terrorista.
And in the studio, I'm joined by my senior foreign editor, Padma Rao Sundarji. Padma, my first question to you is, when we talk about terrorism, when we talk about terrorism in Europe, primarily it emanated post-Syrian, the post-geopolitical instability which took place, and the ISIS came into being. They all talk in one voice after terror strikes. But when it comes to the source, not single superpower is on the same page. Why, Padma?
Well, first of all, I must point out to you, Kartikeya, that terrorism depends, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. If you ask Spain itself, they've had their share of so-called terrorism from the Basque separatist movement for very long. But that ended in 2009. So after 2009, certainly the target, Europe has become the target primarily from Islamist terror groups. And in that sense, there is a commonality because most of these countries are involved in the fight against terror, the US-led, primarily US-led and NATO-led war against terror. There is a certain amount of unity, but I think what is fragmented is the excellent communications between individual security agencies. We saw that in the case of Germany, the Christmas market attack. We saw that in various other cases in Europe. So there seems to be somehow a divide over two things. One is how to, treat and how to what extent each country should accept refugees, because in the public opinion, it's primarily because of taking on refugees from the Syrian war that there is an increase in terrorism. Now, that is not strictly true. There need not be a link between the two. But there is, let's say, dissonance over that between individual European countries. And there has been not entirely watertight providing of information to each other on terror suspects who have been on the radar, as this man indeed was.
But Padma, when we say it's colossal security failure, how do countries tackle lone wolf radicalization, and when lorries, SUVs and trucks become weapons of war?
But, I wouldn't call it a colossal security failure, Kartikeya, because, look, the thing is that every country has its laws, and the European Union's laws, all the countries, they're firmly embedded in their constitutions that are based upon human rights, protection of human rights, which essentially means that they're not, the kinds of, let's say, unlike Turkey, for instance, or unlike many other slightly more totalitarian states, if you can call them that, where just the mere suspicion of having anything to do with terror groups alone is enough for the police to actually take you into detention. Now, Europe cannot be that. Europe has a very firm, identity of, as the French say, liberté, égalité, fraternité. So this is the basis of their constitution. It fails them sometimes, I will certainly admit. At times like this, when you wonder, or in Christmas, at the Christmas market in Germany or in Munich, you wonder if these people were on the police radar for so long, then why were they not brought in? Why did it take them so long to actually nail them? Well, because the existing laws in those countries do not permit, taking in somebody on an arrest merely upon the suspicion of being connected to terror groups. Now, in the case of this boy,
you're saying it's the cultural mooring.
It's not a cultural mooring, it's a constitutional mooring.
Which reflects in law.
It's a constitutional mooring. Those are the European Union's constitutions, and unless those constitutions are drastically overhauled, and that is indeed the public mood that you were referring to currently. As you know, the largest economy, Germany, is going in for elections on the 24th of September. The biggest right-wing party is expected to get into parliament with a 10% vote. And I expect that all those right-wing groups across Europe, fairly or unfairly so, are certainly going to see a boost because of these attacks.
So is it correct for me to say that the crisis in West Asia and the immigration issue has actually shaped up various domestic issues in Europe?
Yes, but then, it's not just the West Asian, the Syrian, arrival of Syrian refugees in Europe. There have been already many groups. Let's not forget France, the second largest economy, has been a colonizing power in much of North Africa, what you call the Maghreb. So now there are many thousands of people, French citizens who are from those countries. It's a bit, Kartikeya, like the United Kingdom being the colonizing power in India, and then, Indians and Pakistanis going to the United Kingdom, migrating to the United Kingdom. So there is that face-off, there is that resentment, underlying resentment, especially among right-wing groups, that has been there for a very long time. Now, in Spain, as I said, they have been under the Arab rule for very long, and the position of Muslims in Spain is entirely different, because Spain has not actually colonized Muslim countries. What Spain has done is Spain has been under Arab rule. So the Muslim community in Spain does not live in ghettos like it does in France. It's much more integrated within the system. But certainly, this could be a backlash against one of two things. One is that Spain was a hub for several years for a kind of hawala traffic, illegal money going to the ISIS in Syria. And the other thing is,
can you please shed some light on it? Why Spain, and why Spain became a hub
because of its
hawala
proximity
traffic?
to Morocco and its proximity to North Africa. It's a very narrow
strait.
Yes. So because of that, there was a certain amount of money transfer. Also the laxity. Generally it's much easier. These are all holiday destinations there in the south. There are people who come and go, and it's been like that for decades and decades. So yes, certainly there were slip-ups, and but then the Spanish police came down really heavily on this form of terrorism. In fact, they woke up to it in 2004 with the train attacks in Madrid, which was actually by the Al-Qaeda. And I think that was a turning point for Spain to intensify its efforts to clamp down on Islamist terrorism of any kind. And this may be one of the backlashes. Having said that, the other backlash, which I actually believe is what the European agencies have been saying for very long, which is that now that the ISIS is disintegrating in Iraq and in Syria, there are bound to be lone wolf attacks. And I think this pretty much belongs to the category of lone wolf attacks, which is a backlash of the ISIS shrinking and being driven out of Syria.
These terrible episodes, does it strengthen the India's case when America says good Taliban, bad Taliban, the difference between good terrorists and a bad terrorist? Because we have been suffering with such terror attacks for more than 2 decades.
Kartikeya, I would love to say yes, I agree with you, but unfortunately I'm a cynic in that respect. No country is going to take India's side on terrorism and good terrorism, a good Lashkar and a bad Lashkar, and a good Jaish and a bad Jaish, as long as they need Pakistan for their own strategic purposes. So we are nowhere on the radar as far as this is concerned. Certainly many of these European countries always express support whenever, when there's an attack from Pakistan-based terrorists upon India. But as far as doing something, going one step beyond that and taking more radical steps against Pakistan-based terrorist groups is concerned, I'm afraid not. Not unless they are affected.
So you're saying that it's going to be our lonely war on terror?
Oh, absolutely. It is our lonely war, and it will remain our lonely war as long as the snake does not rear its head to bite them.
Padma, you have spent a substantial time of your career reporting from Europe. Do these events have the capacity to shape the larger foreign policy of the Union?
Well, there has been, as you know, Kartikeya, the essential debate in the European Union has been the fragmentation of the Union, the extreme right-wing and conservatives demanding an end to the European Union because they feel that it's an artificial kind of bond, and, these are countries with very individualistic traditions and languages and everything. So there has been that call for very long to dismantle the Eurozone, to go back to their old currencies. On the other hand, the European Union is currently undergoing a revival. Germany and France, their economies are on the upswing again after the recession and after some very somber years. So, that is bound to again strengthen the argument for the European Union to stick together. As far as the economic bond is concerned. As far as the political bond is concerned, the European Union has tried for long to forge a unified political bond, almost like the United States of the European Union, as opposed to the USA, as opposed to Russia, as opposed to the big emerging powers, China and India. But that has never happened simply because, they have not, when it comes to trade, then, you had, for instance, this curious situation of the Eurofighter and the French Dassault Rafale facing off even though these are the two biggest economies of the European Union, one would say they should be happy whichever jet, you know, the Indians buy. But that was a very fierce competition. So this happens all over the world. And as long as countries of the European Union are at loggerheads, especially France and Germany, over trade, international trade, you cannot have a mutual foreign policy. You cannot have a mutual entity to represent. You cannot speak in one voice.
You know, I was going through, certain information which was coming, like, for example, the person who has been detained, he says that his identity has been stolen.
Yes.
Now, war in 80s, or the terrorism of 80s, that a Mujahideen figure or the post-Mujahideen figure, you know, it's more about cyberspace, more about the net, more about lone radicalization, your laptop, your privacy. Is this the new challenge curve for counter-terror agencies world across?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
I said, is this the new curve in terms of terrorism?
What is the new curve?
Cyberspace, stealing of identity,
well,
data.
I think, you know, this was I think what this alleged terrorist was referring to was, you know, if you remember yesterday, they found an identity card in the van. And the card had the name of Driss Oukabir. Now, what Driss Oukabir did allegedly yesterday is to turn himself into the police, because when he heard that he was being searched, looked for, and he turned himself into the police and claims that his ID card was stolen by his brother. So I think whether, you know, and certainly you're right, I mean, this is a physical ID card, you know, it's possibly looking at what's going on with the dark web these days, and, you know, the amount of penetration there is, you know, of people being able to steal each other's identities merely over a cell phone. Certainly that is a big danger, you know, because cyberspace is not as watertight as we would like it to be.
And last question before I let go of you, Padma, a story which you had reported that, you know, there was a ship which is being organized by some far-right groups so that, you know, they take the refugees and drop them back to the place where they come from. Do these episodes have the potential to reignite the fault lines, civilizational fault lines?
Well, you know,
or it's far-fetched.
I mean, I would say, no, you're partly right, because, you know, if you'd asked me this question about 20 years ago, I would never have seen the emergence of a right wing in Europe. There certainly has been an emergence and a revitalization of the right wing. But having said that, you know, I think this is a continent, let's not forget, which has seen in a consolidated way the horrors of the Second World War, the horrors of the Holocaust, and especially Germany, its largest and most powerful country, is, you know, other than getting into parliament perhaps as a minority group, I don't see the right wing making headway in Germany or in France or anywhere in Europe to such an extent that they can influence policy.
But substantially, they will have their presence in Parliament.
They already have their presence. I mean, each and every one is represented in the European Parliament, for instance. But the European Parliament, and this is a personal opinion, as I said to you earlier, as a political entity, it's pretty much of a toothless tiger. So that doesn't worry me too much. In Germany, the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, is scheduled to get into the Parliament at the end of September. But then again, you know, see, the world over, Karthik, and you've seen that, you've covered politics extensively yourself. You know, parties say one thing during the election campaigns and actually do something else, you know. So I don't think that they're going to stick and carry through on all that fiery rhetoric. They're simply not going to be able to, because they will lose public support.
Thank you, Padma. Thank you for joining me on this show. So, our senior foreign editor, Padma Rao Sundarji, putting in perspective the episodes, the terror attacks which took place in Spain. Now, moving on, but sticking on to the same story, we are getting you the live visuals, the latest sound bites, opinion, and the development on this terror attack which has taken place in Spain. And the latest says the suspects claim that his identity was stolen. And now moving on, in a substantial development, Japan has supported India's position on Doklam. Japan has conveyed its support to India and Bhutan on the Doklam standoff between India and China through diplomatic channels. Reports coming in suggest Japanese ambassador to India, Kenji Hiramatsu, and his team of diplomats have conveyed Tokyo's position to New Delhi and Thimphu. This comes a month ahead of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to India from September 13 to 16. According to reports, Japanese diplomats were in touch with Indian officials since late June. They have been briefed by Indian and Bhutanese government functionaries on the situation in Doklam. Japan is the first major neighbor of China which has extended its support to India. So that's an important development which has taken place, and on this issue I'll be joined by my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran from the newsroom, who will be giving us the perspective on as to how this development came about and does it really make a difference. So Ramesh, my question to you, does this support make any difference?
Well, good morning, Karthikeya. The Japanese ambassador is the one who made those comments, and incidentally is concurrently accredited to Bhutan as well. So thereby, to that extent, his words do carry weight and significance. And just to parse the text of his remarks, he says in no uncertain terms that China must not attempt to change the status quo obtaining in Doklam, which Bhutan claims as its own territory, whereas China says it is Chinese territory. This is the first official statement one has heard from countries outside the region, namely Japan, who have come out forcefully in support of India and Bhutan against China on the issue of Doklam.
But on Doklam issue, you know, Ramesh, this question comes to my mind. Bhutan has maintained a diplomatic silence. Other people have spoken in India's support. Why is that?
Well, that's one way of looking at it, Karthikeya, but Bhutan has made an official statement, the first statement to that extent, on the 29th of June, 13 days or 14 days, 2 weeks after the incident happened on Doklam, on the Doklam Plateau. And the day after that, on the 30th of June, India joined issue with Bhutan and issued an official statement. So these are the two official statements one had heard from Bhutan and India. But that said, Minister Swaraj in the floor of the parliament made it official that the only plausible way forward would be for both sides, India and China, to simultaneously withdraw from their respective positions on the Doklam Plateau. And that's where things stand at the moment. That said, back-channel talks are happening even as we speak, first at the level of the National Security Advisors, who is the special representative on the Indian side for the India-China boundary talks. So he was in Beijing for talks on the preparatory meeting for the BRICS summit, which is going to be held next month in Beijing, in Xi'an actually. And we can expect going forward both India and China to hold more talks on resolution of the dispute.
But tell me one thing, before, I end this part of my bulletin, Ramesh, first it was editorials, then came the audio editorials, then came publicity material. And the official news agency of China has released a video, two anchors making fun of India. It's like Doordarshan creating an official program to criticize Chinese position, and that too with a makeup and a mock beard and extremely rude dialogues.
Indeed, at one level, Karthikeya, these commentary and unsolicited advice and remarks should be treated with the contempt they deserve. It should be taken with a pinch of salt, and probably at some level it betrays the Chinese frustrations, because here is an incident which was where India preemptively took action on the Doklam Plateau to prevent Chinese construction of the road there. And to that extent, several Chinese commentators have said that India has changed the rules of the game, as it were, and that has added a new dimension, as it were, to the Sino-Indian relationship.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you for joining me on this story. My colleague Ramesh Ramachandran giving us a perspective as to what it means for Japan to support India's position on Doklam. So this is all at my end, but news and other stories will continue on the other side. So stay tuned in.